Nature has an order, a power to restore balance. I believe he is that power. We call him Godzilla.
But speaking of the good doctor, let's get into Dr. Serizawa himself, because I have a ton to say. Now, Serizawa is my personal favorite character in the movie. Now, part of that, of course, is his namesake, but the other thing is that I find him infinitely fascinating as a character, but really tragically underdeveloped. And the reason why he's my favorite character is because he's the biggest proponent of the theme of Godzilla, and the biggest connection to Godzilla in the film in regards to the human cast. He's the one who knows everything about Godzilla. He's the expert on paleontology and on Godzilla. He knows everything that's going on with the MUTOs and Godzilla. And he's got a really interesting perspective on the monsters and what they mean. The dude is the biggest proponent of the classic theme of Godzilla, in regards to man being arrogant about how much they control over nature, and nature occasionally having to remind us of how much control we actually have over it. That being represented, of course, by Godzilla. Serizawa sees Godzilla as this godlike entity, that he is nature's embodiment of control, of keeping the orders of nature preserved. That there's an order that nature has that has to be maintained. That whenever that order is disrupted, that Godzilla wakes up to set it back into place. Now, we'll get into how I feel about that being Godzilla's characterization later, but Serizawa feeling that way about it is really, really interesting. It kind of gives him this almost romantic view of Godzilla. He seems to have this very naturalistic view on the world, this love of nature, this inherent fascination with it, and this almost religious viewpoint on the Big G, which is really, really cool. But the problem is that all these feelings that the dude has for Godzilla are kind of left ambiguous, or just not in this particular movie. Now, I said that Dr. Serizawa is tragically underdeveloped, and that's mostly in the case of the movie, which of course is the only thing that we can really use to develop the character. However, in regards to expanding out the canon, Godzilla Awakening, the prequel graphic novel to this movie, which I've already reviewed, so if you want to see my thoughts on that, go and watch that review. The best and most important thing that it does is flesh out the history of Dr. Serizawa and give us his backstory, mainly by telling the story of his father, who was one of the first people to work for Monarch, and also the man who discovered Godzilla, which gives Dr. Ishiro Serizawa a very interesting connection to Godzilla. Because he might equate Godzilla with his father and have almost this nostalgia for him, and almost see him as this benevolent force regardless of the destruction that he's going to cause. So, he's really interesting in that way, but in the film itself, he doesn't really give an explanation for why he both loves Godzilla so much, why he finds him so fascinating, and why exactly he has this viewpoint on him that he does. He just doesn't get enough of his backstory in the movie. Now, this all comes down to Serizawa not being the thing that the movie is focusing on, much like Godzilla in that regard. He doesn't get enough screen time, and more importantly, the dude does not get enough dialogue. Ken Watanabe and the movie have kind of been criticized for basically just putting him in there to stop and stare dramatically at things, which I kind of agree with, but what it leads to is that his character is just way too mysterious, which can be good. The namesake of his character was also mysterious in the original Godzilla, not knowing much about him until way later on in the movie, and the mystery lending to his tragedy and also to the nature of his character, given that he's very personal, very much so in his head, and holding this big, huge, devastating secret. And Ishiro Serizawa in this movie is kind of similar in that he too is holding all these big, world-ending secrets in his head with Godzilla, the MUTOs, all these other devastating monsters that could be out there. But the issue is that we just don't get to learn enough about him, and the guy does not get enough dialogue. Too much of his dialogue is specifically there for exposition and not enough about how he feels about situations. Mostly just in his facial expressions, which is fine, but there's just too much of it. Facial expressions representing a character's emotions are fine, but there has to be a certain point where those facial expressions are given some sort of thing to explain them, and we never truly get that. There are a bunch of individual strands in the film that could have tied his character together and truly made him super interesting, but sadly they just never really do. And the other thing is that because of how mysterious he is and because of how little dialogue he gets, I'm also not sure how exactly we're supposed to view Dr. Serizawa as a character. Mainly, are we supposed to see him as morally right just because he doesn't think we should use the nuclear weapons against the monsters and should just let nature take hold and let Godzilla kill the MUTOs? Or should we see him as morally ambiguous because he's covering up all this information about the MUTOs and not giving the public information about all these devastating monsters? I'm just not sure about how we should feel about all that. And again, it's just all because he doesn't get enough dialogue and he doesn't get enough of a strong characterization or a character arc. We just don't get to see him go through any significant change. Or at least, I don't think we do. It's a little bit unclear, mainly in his, honestly, most famous line in the movie, or his most famous speech, when he's talking to Admiral Stantz later on in the film, and he gives that famous line now about, the arrogance of man is thinking that nature is in our control, and not the other way around. Let them fight. That awesome, awesome series of lines, and ultimately the thing that sums up Godzilla, is really, really fantastic, but the delivery is a bit strange, because I'm not sure if this is a realization for him, or if this is something that the dude already knew and is now imparting onto Admiral Stantz and thus the rest of the world. I'm not sure if he went through a character arc based on all the people who died in the MUTO's escape from Janjira and all the people that have died afterwards and Godzilla waking up, if he's realizing now that man has to stop trying to contain nature, because that's what he tried to do with the MUTO, also being the one to give the order to initially kill it in Janjira. And then based on the events that go throughout the entire movie, is he then learning that we have to step away and let nature take course, or is this something that the dude already knew? I'm not sure, because he also said something similar when he introduced the idea of Godzilla earlier in the movie, when he told us what Godzilla is, being nature's agent of balance. I'm just not sure how he feels about everything, and whether or not his speech towards the end of the movie is a character arc and realization, or if that's something he already knew and he just doesn't need a character arc because he's imparting lessons onto the rest of the world. I'm just not sure. I wish it was a character arc because it would make him more interesting, and also make him a little bit closer to his namesake in the original movie. Since Dr. Serizawa in that film was mastering this dangerous, dangerous weapon that he didn't want to reveal to the rest of the world, but was forced to in order to deal with the reality of Godzilla, but then dying with it because he thought it was too dangerous to give to the rest of the world, and that it would just lead to another arms race. I think there could have been ways to make Serizawa's character arc in this mirror that, and also just make his character more interesting, by realizing how much power nature has and how little control man truly has, and how much we have to realize that and accept that, otherwise we're going to destroy ourselves. Again, his character is good, but just underdeveloped. And Ken Watanabe's performance is also excellent. He feels very, very kind of worn down and kind of earthly, and very, very intellectual, and also, every time you look at his face, it always looks like there's something going on behind it, mostly shock. But overall, his performance is just a little bit too cold and a little bit too distant for the character that we're given in the movie. Again, it makes sense, but there's this never a moment where we get to learn enough about him. Throughout the entire movie, he's just stopping and staring and ominously delivering lines about the monsters. Again, his performance is good for that. He's a very, very dramatic actor, but I just feel like the character, he's never really given a chance to just kind of come out of his shell and show us who he really is. He almost seems like he's got a wall around himself the entire movie, which would be fine if it was intentional and if it was brought up. This is kind of a similar situation to Ford, that we just don't get enough of an emotional reaction from him in the movie in regards to dialogue and his feelings about the situation. Again, it all could have worked if it would have been intentional and if it would have been brought up. The closest thing he gets to an emotional response is the scene that gives his real backstory in the movie. And it's one of the best scenes in the movie because it's a really great acting moment and also a really good moment in terms of making reference to original Godzilla lore. And I'm, of course, referring to the scene where he tells Admiral Stantz that his father was in the blast at Hiroshima and that he has this watch, which is held off on the time when the bomb exploded. It gives him a really interesting connection to nuclear power and to nuclear warfare. And it does make his feelings about nature make sense. He doesn't like atomic weapons. That makes perfect sense. And what I also like about this is it also gives him a realistic reason to study the MUTOs, because they're creatures that adapt to atomic radiation and feed on it, using it as a power source. Now, the reason why he would be interested in this is because it could also lead to humanity finding a way to be able to survive nuclear blasts and also use that power in a way where, for good, where it's just there to give us power and it can't be used as a weapon. The problem is that this scene isn't given enough weight, and also his backstory not given enough weight. Once it's mentioned, it's never brought up again. And I'm just not really sure what exactly we're supposed to take away from it. Again, he's just too mysterious. Because he shows Admiral Stantz this watch, tells him it belonged to his father, and then he walks away, and Admiral Stantz is just left to kind of lament that. Again, it's a great moment between them, but I'm not sure what we're supposed to take away from it. And it's easily Ken Watanabe's best scene acting-wise, probably right next to the scene where he gives the backstory about Godzilla, but it's certainly his best character moment. And overall, the mentioning of Hiroshima in regards to his character just comes off a little bit too much to me like a cute nod to Godzilla lore and to actual history of atomic weapons and to the production history of Godzilla, being an entire response to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, rather than being an integral part of his character and the story. Again, I think it could have been. I think there's a lot of potential here for him having a fantastic, solid character arc, and also a fantastic connection to Ford and Joe Brody because of his tragic connection to atomic weapons, both having lost family members, supposedly. Now, this also brings me into a major plot hole in regards to this both supposedly being in canon with Godzilla Awakening and also in regards to the character's age in this movie. Here are my problems as they stand. So, let's take the movie on its own merits for a second in this scene. Now, it's never explicitly stated in this movie that Serizawa's father died in the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, though that scene certainly implies that he's dead, given that he's the one who now has this watch, and that he holds it with such reverence, kind of reminding him of his father. The major implication here is that Serizawa's dad died in Hiroshima. But which would have been great, and also again would have given him a great connection to both Ford and Joe Brody. Now, the continuity problem that this has with Awakening is that, obviously, Serizawa's dad didn't die in the bombing of Hiroshima, though he was certainly there. But the problem is that that would mean, both in this movie and also as it's presented in Godzilla Awakening, that the dude would have had to have been born in either 1945 specifically, or a little bit before 1945, or maybe a little bit after if, like, his father had died in Hiroshima, but his mother survived and he was born a little bit afterwards. And here's why that's a problem. There is no way that Dr. Serizawa is 69 years old in this movie. Ken Watanabe sure as hell ain't that old. The dude's exactly the same age as my dad. He was born in 1959. And they didn't age him up in any way with makeup to make him look like he was 69 or 70, like his character would have to be if either his dad was dead in 1945, being killed in Hiroshima, or even if this was in continuity with Awakening, which I don't really think it is, because there's a lot of other continuity problems with Godzilla Awakening in that way that I won't get into because it's not really important to the movie. But either way, it does not make any fucking sense that that dude is 70 years old. Again, they should have either gotten an older actor, or just given him some makeup to make him look older, or just specifically say that his father survived the Hiroshima bombing and that he was born afterwards, which still could have given him a good connection to Godzilla, a connection to Hiroshima because his parents would have survived the bombing. Oh, his mother died in the book, which would still give him that connection, and also keep him connected to everything that happened in 1954 with Godzilla. So it all still could have worked and kept him to be a realistic age given how old the actor is. Now, here's the other thing, in regards to both the mentioning of Hiroshima and to the character's name. So, like the bombing of Hiroshima being mentioned and kind of just being a cute nod, Ken Watanabe's character being named Serizawa comes off a little bit too much like just a cute reference rather than this being a rebooted version of that character. Now, let me just say, I'm not going to get all bent out of shape because they named the guy Serizawa and he really isn't anything like the character in the original Gojira, except for a couple of coincidences like him having all these secrets bubbling around in his head, him being so mysterious. Again, that's cool. But in regards to his characterization and in regards to his personal history and the purpose he has in the film, he's really nothing like Dr. Serizawa. In this movie, he's a paleontologist who, based on the special features in the Blu-ray, proposed a theory that some prehistoric creatures survived several mass extinctions and buried themselves in the bottom of the ocean where they could get radiation, since the world that they would have lived on would have been more radioactive than the modern world. And that because of man's entering into the atomic age, that these creatures would reawaken and cause destruction. And that he studies these creatures. Fine, that's cool. But the problem is that it's really nothing like Dr. Serizawa. Now here's the thing. Again, I'm so thrilled that they even thought to name one of the characters in their movie after a classic Godzilla character. It's a really cool reference, and again, it shows that these guys know Godzilla. But the thing is that it would have made a lot more sense if they would have called him Yamane, and if this would have been a modern reinterpretation of Dr. Yamane, because almost everything I just mentioned is exactly what Dr. Yamane was in the original Gojira. He was a paleontologist. He proposed the theory that Godzilla survived an extinction event by burrowing to the bottom of the sea, and that atomic weapons woke him up. More importantly, Dr. Yamane's perceptions of Godzilla are almost the same as Dr. Serizawa's perceptions of Godzilla in this movie. He doesn't want the military to kill him, and he sees him as this positive force. Yamane wants to study Godzilla. He doesn't want to kill him. And the reason why he wants to study him is because he was able to survive an H-bomb blast, which is the same reason why Serizawa wants to study the MUTOs. And overall, Ken Watanabe's performance is kind of this closed, emotionally closed anyway, very emotive performance. Is closer to Takashi Shimura's performance as Dr. Yamane in the original Godzilla. And of course, this would also fix the thing of his age. Dr. Yamane is supposed to be around 70 in the original Gojira, and that's what Dr. Serizawa would have to be in this movie, given all the stuff I just mentioned. So it also would have made sense if they would have called him Yamane in that way. But at the end of the day, they went with Dr. Serizawa because he's more well-known as a human Godzilla character, arguably the most well-known of any Godzilla character. And just the fact that they decided to do that is good enough for me, and I think that that's cool. So overall, Dr. Serizawa is good, but he needed a more well-defined character arc, more dialogue, and a clearer backstory. But overall, I like him. Now, I've spent a lot of time on the human cast, so I kind of want to start moving on. But in regards to the rest of the cast, they're good, but not great. The stands out being Dr. Graham, Dr. Serizawa's assistant. and of course Admiral Stantz, who are both well acted, likable, and have a good place in the story. Graham serves to be kind of Dr. Serizawa's translator, not because he's speaking Japanese, but because the scientific exposition that he gives out is kind of very, very not suitable for laymen. So Graham kind of sees fit to explain some of the things that he's saying, and kind of stands to translate some of the technobabble-esque things that he says. She's also got kind of an interesting relationship with Serizawa. She calls him sensei, meaning that he would be her mentor in regards to teaching her about all this stuff about atomic age monsters and all this stuff. I wish their relationship was a little bit more well fleshed out, but it's still good, and I like that it was there, though I wish her character was given a little bit more depth. Admiral Stantz is a great character. He's very, very unique as a military leader because he's not an idiot and he's not an asshole. He's extremely level-headed and extremely focused on keeping people safe. That's the only purpose that he has. He just wants to protect his country, and he's not about purveying this government cover-up, although that is certainly one of his goals in one of his scenes early on. But once shit gets real, once people start dying, he's like, we're gonna save people's lives, I'm protecting my country, screw the cover-ups, screw everything else, I'm just about protecting people. But the other big thing is that, aside from the fact that he does try and make the nuke plan work, he isn't crazy about doing it. He's not crazy about launching a nuclear weapon, but he doesn't have any fucking choice. It's the only plan that they have to deal with the monsters so far that makes any sense, that has any chance of working. So I really like that about that character, and I'm really glad that they gave the military a characterization in this movie that's very realistic, very kind of humble, and very focused on trying to save the world rather than being a shadowy asshole organization just out for their own needs. I really like that, and Stantz is awesome in that way. The acting and characterization of the rest of the cast kind of vary. Some of them are fine, some of them are annoying. But overall, the cast is really, really strong. The characters have a lot of promise for being very, very interesting and good points of view to follow in a Godzilla story. But the problem is that a lot of them are kind of underdeveloped, mainly Serizawa and Ford. And the movie never truly balances out their relationships in regards to the monsters. And speaking of the monsters, I think it's about time that we finally got into them in this story and how exactly they all match in with everything and how they hold up. Now, as I've done in the past in this series, I'm going to start off with the new monsters first, and then we'll get into the big G. So let's, of course, start off with the MUTOs, the movie's own original monsters, and not, of course, Toho monsters. This is their first appearance. And both how they work in this movie on their own, and of course, we'll also compare them to both Godzilla himself and also to the greater lexicon of Godzilla movies and how they hold up. But overall, I actually really, really like the MUTOs. I know a lot of people don't, and I'll get into why a lot of people don't and why I think they've got problems later on. But overall, I think they've got really, really good, creepy designs. And if you read the book that was the production booklet for this movie, Godzilla, The Art of Destruction, you'll see that they put a lot of time and consideration into putting these monsters together, both as creatures that could exist in the natural world, how they would look the coolest, and also how they would look the best in regards to this being a Godzilla movie, and also their relationship to Godzilla and making them make sense with all those different elements. So a lot of care was put into building these monsters and in regards to how they look and how they behave, and it really, really shows, and they really, really pay off for it. Despite not having a real face, the MUTOs are extremely expressive and have a lot of personality. Really important for a Godzilla movie because that's something that's always been very important in having the monsters stand out from just being generic, big, mean forces of nature that don't have any personality. Each Godzilla monster has its own personality, and the MUTOs are no different. They have this very interesting characterization that, I know I've been comparing this movie a lot to Rodan, but the MUTOs kind of function in a very similar way to how the Rodans functioned in that movie. They're not presented as evil, just lost in time. Their only goal is to meet up with each other and just fight for their own personal survival. That's one of the things that I really like about the monsters in this movie, is that their story, and also the humans, is that they're all just trying to survive in this world. None of them have any malice in regards to each other specifically, though maybe the humans don't necessarily fit that. But the MUTOs don't want to really destroy anything. They just need to survive. They're the only two left of their species, and they're not meant to be in this world. They're strangely tragic in that way, like the Rodans were in the first Rodan movie. And their only goal is to prolong their species, to procreate, to continue their legacy, which is all animals' goal in life, is to find a mate, to find somebody to connect with, and to procreate, to prolong your species. And I really like that that is both the goal of the MUTOs, their characterization, and also the overall monster plot of the movies, is that we have to stop the MUTOs from reproducing, because if they do, they're going to take over the world and destroy it, and that's what Godzilla is trying to do. But it makes the MUTOs sympathetic. We feel for them. We feel for their plight, but we also see the destruction that they cause, and ultimately that they just don't fit in this world. The world has evolved past them. Now, to get back to the designs, again, I really like them, but they're not terribly original. Multi-armed insect-like monsters have ruled movies for the past 2 decades, like the Cloverfield monster, of course, the monsters in the Mist, and, of course, the bugs in Starship Troopers. But, in my opinion, they do enough to stand out from all those other creatures, and enough to make a true impression. I love all the red and the gray that goes into their design. Again, it's kind of a stereotype of modern-day monsters, to just kind of give them kind of just black, smooth, kind of insect-like looks, to make them look really horrific. But it works for the MUTOs, and it gives them a very kind of almost elegant, alien-looking feel. They look different from Godzilla in a good way. They're a completely different quadrant of monsters. Gareth Edwards pitched them in one of the documentaries on the Blu-ray as kind of being the UFOs of giant monsters, being mysterious, being sleek, being creepy. And we don't really know much about them, which is why they're called the MUTOs, the massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, which is cool. In regards also to comparing them to UFOs, one of the coolest things about their design is their eyes, and also their claws. They both glow red. The eyes glowing red, of course, just all the time, and that expresses their emotions, what they're doing, and also when they're intaking radiation, as well as the claws. The claws glow red both when they're feeding on radiation, but also when they're about to charge up their EMP attacks, which both MUTOs have. They glow red, and then they slam them to the ground in order to produce an EMP strike, which knocks out all the planes in the area. I'll get back to the EMP in a couple seconds. But their designs lend really well to a true scary monster movie. Which is funny, because not all Godzilla movies, in fact, most Godzilla movies don't fight hard for that kind of horrific tone. And it's good to see them kind of go back to that with this movie. The MUTOs are really, really scary. There's a couple of moments that are really, really pulse-poundingly tense, especially the scene in the train attack when the female MUTO attacks the train carrying the 2 nukes to San Francisco. And there's that great scene where the soldiers are investigating a bridge to see if it's able to support the train. They say it's good to go, and then the female MUTO attacks, being hidden in the background. There's a great shot where you see Ford and Sergeant Morales in the foreground, and you just see the hump of the female MUTO come up behind the mountain and head towards them. And also you mistake one of the claws of the MUTO for a tree, which then kills a couple soldiers. In that scene where the female MUTO looks for Ford and Morales and goes around the train about to kill them and circles around the tracks, and you see it move around slowly. It's a great tense sequence until finally the MUTO is then attracted to the train to get the nuke. So I really like the MUTOs in that way because they function so well as creepy monsters. And adding into that is their roars. I love their roars. They're very, very high-pitched and they sound very much like insect clicks. Again, which doesn't necessarily sound terribly original, but it works for their kind of creepy vibe. And they also have a wide range of vocalizations for both when they're trying to terrify the humans, when they're trying to intimidate Godzilla, and also when they're trying to court each other, when they both meet up with each other in San Francisco. And there's that great scene where the male MUTO rises on a building and the female MUTO comes out of smoke and they both embrace. It's a great, great scene. I also really like the decision to make them creatures that feed on radiation as a food and energy source, which they can then weaponize as the EMP. It's a good way to kind of make them relevant to the overall story of Godzilla and the theme of the film. keeping the franchise rooted in the fear of radiation and the problems caused by our nuclear proliferation, both in regards to weaponry, using nuclear power as a power source, and just everything that we use in regards to nuclear power. And these creatures being so destructive and dangerous shows that they've woken up because we made the perfect world for them to come, spawn, and wipe us all out. It really works well with the overall poignancy of Godzilla that we've doomed ourselves, that our creation of this destructive power is the thing that's destroying us because we wake up these monsters and allow them to survive. I really, really like that in that way. And the EMP attack that the creatures use is also a really good way to both make the film fit in with the classic roots of the destruction of atomic energy, but also make the film feel very relevant to modern day concerns. Using EMPs in warfare is something that you see crop up a lot in modern day spy, espionage, war films, modern day war games like the Call of Duty series, and it's really cool that these monsters that are supposed to represent our fears are using EMPs, which can knock out electronics for a wide distance. And living in a world that relies so heavily on electronics, and about being able to communicate with each other, it's really scary that we're being attacked by these monsters that can cut us off from that. You not being able to check your smartphone, all this different stuff, it leads to a really terrifying monster, and a monster that has an attack that's relevant to modern day concerns. So I really like that the movie is able to both make these creatures fit in with both the classic themes of Godzilla, and classic Godzilla monsters that are based on atomic radiation, and also into modern day concerns with the EMP attack. Now, despite that, the EMP has received some criticism from people who say that there's no reason for the monsters to have an EMP attack since they're from a time where it wouldn't do anything. There were no electronics in their age to knock out with an EMP. So why the hell would they evolve to have it? Now, two things on that. I think there's two options that do make it make sense. One, it could be more of an after effect thing rather than them using it specifically as an attack. Since the creatures consume radiation and atomic explosions in the presence of radiation have been known to knock out electronics before, like nuclear blasts, knocking out electronics for widespread distances, which we've seen in Godzilla movies before, like in The Return of Godzilla, when the aerial nuke both knocks out all the electronics in Tokyo and also wakes up Godzilla. But they do use the word attack in regards to the EMP in the movie, and also the way it's used, it always is used when the creatures need to defend themselves, like when the MUTO is being attacked by the military after it attacks the submarine. So it is clearly there used to be an attack. So how else does it make sense? Well, let's get into number two. However, this reason got cut out of the movie, but it does exist. The EMP has been evolved by these creatures as a defense mechanism against Godzilla, their predator. This explanation got cut out of the movie, however, since later on in the film, in early drafts of the script, when the monsters were fighting in San Francisco, Godzilla was supposed to try and use his atomic blast on the MUTOs, but the EMP was supposed to cut it short, and it was supposed to cancel out the attack. Godzilla's atomic breath being one of his primary weapons, it would make sense that creatures that his species would feed upon would evolve to protect themselves against that attack, and the EMP is genius in that way, but the sequence where it was supposed to be introduced got cut out of the movie. You can see where it was supposed to be, however. When Godzilla has the female MUTO down and he's about to kill her, he kind of breathes in, but is then stopped by the male MUTO, grabbing him and kind of flinging him around. Very clear to me that that scene is where Godzilla was supposed to charge up his blast, the male MUTO knock it out with an EMP, and that idea would have been introduced. It should have been in the frickin' movie. Because not only would it have given a more realistic reason for the MUTOs to have an EMP, but it also would have more enhanced their connection to Godzilla, which is the next thing I want to talk about. I do really, really like the way the MUTOs are kind of given a good, solid relationship with Godzilla. It's kind of an interesting way to do kind of monsters having enemies, because it's a little bit more realistic and animalistic than other Godzilla movies in the past, and it's the first time we've gotten a real predator-prey-esque relationship with Godzilla and his enemies, and it's really, really cool. Godzilla is the predators of the MUTO. The MUTO are his prey. He's the alpha apex predator of an ancient ecosystem in which the MUTOs were a part of it. And it also gives them an interesting parasite-host relationship, which is introduced in one of the earliest scenes of the movie in the Philippines, where they find the two spores that hatch into the MUTOs inside of the bones of an ancient Godzilla species. Which I like for a couple of reasons. Because again, it gives them a good connection to Godzilla, meaning that these monsters aren't just randomly showing up and Godzilla's just fighting them because his name is in the title. They have a previously established relationship. And what I also like about that scene in the Philippines is that we get to see that these creatures have killed Godzillas before, and that they're dangerous to Godzilla, that they can take him down. That despite him being the predators of the MUTO, that in the past, MUTOs have taken down Godzilla. Now, the overall ins and outs of this did also get cut out of the movie, because the idea is supposed to be that not only does Godzilla want to kill the MUTOs because he's their predator, but also the MUTOs want to kill Godzilla because they want to use his carcass as a nest for their infants, which would have been really, really cool and given more stakes in regards to their fight. But overall, it is still good. And it's a realistic reason for monsters to want to fight each other rather than them just doing that because that's what they're supposed to do. However, speaking of their relationship with Godzilla, I do have the problem with the MUTOs that they're too heavily focused on. Now, I kind of got into this earlier when I talked about the connections to Rodan, in that opening about smaller, weaker monsters building up to the bigger, stronger monster is fine as long as once the bigger, stronger monster is introduced, the weaker monsters kind of take a backstage to the bigger monster. Not the case here at all. The movie is really, truly about the MUTOs. The human story is mostly in connection to the MUTOs, and the overall progression of the plot is about the MUTOs. Trying to reproduce, going around feeding on radiation. The plot trying to kill the monsters is mostly reliant upon the MUTOs, the radiation from the bombs leading the MUTOs, and the force of the blast going to kill the MUTOs. The story is almost entirely about them, and sadly Godzilla really kind of just gets thrown into the mix and just kind of tags along. His only connection to the overall military plot being that the MUTOs will attract him as well, and that they can blow up all three of them in one go. So it almost feels to me like Godzilla is a co-star in their movie, which is not the way it should have been at all. It also goes back to something that I said a long time ago in old videos in which I talked about how I thought this movie should go and how it should be made. Early on, saying that I thought this movie should have just been about Godzilla and not have any other monsters in it at all, because the problem that could come up is that the monsters will steal focus away from Godzilla and it won't be enough about him. Guess what, kids? That's exactly what happened, and to even more of a degree than I think that I thought back then. And here's why it's a problem. The MUTOs being the focus of the movie, the progression of the plot being about them, the military's plan to kill them being a major part of the story. Here's why it's a problem getting so invested in them and spending so much time on them. The only reason they exist is for Godzilla to kill them. Now, I know that's a major oversimplification of the movie and of the characters, but at the end of the day, the movie is called Godzilla. There's a very, very slim chance, especially given how the MUTOs are characterized in the movie, that the MUTOs are going to kill Godzilla and that they're going to even have a chance of getting rid of him. We know that Godzilla is going to win and that he's going to kill them. So spending so much time building up to them and focusing on them and learning about them seems a little bit superfluous, because we just know that at the end of the day, this is all going to come down to Godzilla's going to get to them and tear them apart, because he's the king of the monsters and this is supposed to be his movie. Now, the other thing is that this kind of overdevelopment of the MUTOs is that it kind of leads to the way Godzilla kills them being kind of an anti-climax, because of how focused on them that we were. Not that Godzilla kills them necessarily easily, the fight is very brutal, as I'll get into later, But Godzilla just tearing them apart feels a little bit awkward because the movie was entirely about them. So Godzilla just killing them and then that being it is a little bit anticlimactic. Because of how much of the story was about them and because of how little of it was about Godzilla. It's a major, major problem. But overall, I do really like the MUTOs, and I do appreciate how much effort was put into them being given a strong connection to Godzilla. Speaking of that, let's get into where the major, major portion of this video is going to go, and I know I've been going on for a long time now, so I hope you'll all bear with me. And let's talk about the biggest portion of this movie, or at least it should have been. Let's talk about Godzilla, who is simultaneously the best thing about this movie and also the worst thing.